Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward all research. And when you see that you got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who had problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. Please.
Welcome back to the channel here, this tactical intellectual channel. That opening, I had to use that Malcolm X opening regarding history and how we can learn from it and learn different methods. Now, this video presentation that I'm doing right now, this will be the Black Authority, Jason Black heavy over here, because he did drop a lot of gems and said a lot of pertinent things, and I just wanted to share. Fair use, of course. I wanted to share with more people, and since I have a platform, that's what I will do. So without further ado, let me go ahead and go into his audio from his broadcast.
What we are up against is, in the words of Dr. John Henry Clarke, a world war that's been going on for a millennia now to erase us from history. We are a people who our place, our real estate, our geography, our accomplishments have been co-opted by other people, and they have set about for the one goal and one goal only: to convince us that we are not relevant. Because if you are convinced of what you have already done, then you feel you have a birthright, especially if it's been stolen. So they have set about to convince us you never did anything. You don't have any reason to fight because you never did anything. If you never did anything, then we never took nothing from you. So what are you upset about? You have no reason to be upset because nothing was taken from you because you never did nothing. They have attempted to convince you that you have absolutely no legacy of any kind. You have no legacy outside the American continent, nor do you have a legacy inside of it. That you are a people who simply only came into existence when white people laid their hands on you.
Hey, I definitely agree with everything he said. He's spot on. Now, it's funny because when you conquer a people, you don't just walk away and expect them to behave according to your standards. You have to install various subjugation tactics to these people to keep them in check and keep them on, whether you want them number 2 on the totem pole or you want them to be at the very bottom. You have to do a lot of things to keep them there. So regarding what Jason Black said, our history is lied about, co-opted in the US and worldwide, as well as their history. So we're taught distorted history, and it's meant to skew the context of people groups that people learn about. So say you have group A and then group B, and group B conquers group A. He's gonna have to lie about the history to psychologically put them shackles on them people, so that it'd be easier. If they're a group of warriors, you want to lie about how much of a warrior class or culture they came from. The things that the exploits that they've done, you want to say, okay, my people did that, your people didn't do anything. So that's what you want to do, and that's meant to just reach and be instilled into every generation down the line. So we know over time, the aim is to convince the recipients that they stem from irrelevant people groups. And then you teach the recipients that due to your irrelevant lineage, your legacy is non-existent. So people without a legacy, they aren't even in the fight. They're on the sidelines. They're not even in the game. So let's proceed to the next point.
I've spent the better part of going on 2 decades now teaching you all about this. That, by the way, do you understand what the quintessential ingredient of the brainwashing of the plantations was? Everybody else is taught that they have a history and a legacy and icons except us. When we ask them, where do we come from? They tell you started right here. But no. I mean, where does our history start? Right here. Well, no. I mean, before we met you, you have no history before you met us. Your history begins with us. There is nothing before us. Your history begins right here with me, the white man standing in front of you. This is where your history starts. There is nothing else. And if you did hear some fallacious rumor that there was something before me, just understand it was terrible. It was awful. You all were sitting around eating bugs and everything. We found you crawling on all fours. Let me tell you, it was a bad situation. Bad situation. Nothing but a bunch of animals running around. That's what in the world was going on there. So, no. When we came along, we civilized you. And then, yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, we did.
So you guys hear that? Well, that propaganda is very, very heavy, and that's something that they employ a lot. And you know, when we look at history, you can see the many campaigns that they've had. And what you don't see, you can uncover it, because I guarantee you there's definitely documentation on how things were prior, you know, the sentiments that was shown towards us prior to a certain era. So that's definitely something that we can use. What's the scientific law? You need a equal or greater force exerted on an object. You know, you need that equal force just to stop an object. But we don't want to just stop propaganda. You need to move it. So you got to exert a greater force. We have to be a greater force just to move it back. And not just move it back, but just move it all the way back. So you have to be a greater force, man. So the idea was you had no history, and whatever history that you think you had was decrepit and unappealing. So let's move forward with that.
And when someone has that drilled into their psyches and drilled into their souls, you have to understand that that's a critical, crucial element of slavery. Why is that an essential element of slavery? People understand something. When you have slavery, of course, was meant to completely create the white system of capitalism. Slavery was the essential ingredient that made white capitalism possible. Without it, it would not exist. Period, point blank, in the discussion. Okay, but here's the problem. The problem is that it doesn't exist if you don't have an economic system that is viable until you optimize it. If your economic system is very inefficient, then its ability to prolong itself is going to be very much in question. So once you get to work, you have to start tweaking it. You have to make it more efficient. Ultimately, your goal is to optimize it, to get optimal efficiency out of it. Okay, folks, I went to the explanation to tell you there that if you're the optimal efficiency of slavery is not shackles and chains. Shackles and chains are actually very inefficient. You must remove the shackles and chains, not because you're lazy, not because we're having an intellectual discussion, but because we run the numbers, we run the math. Shackling people and putting them in chains is very inefficient.
So now I hope that point wasn't lost on you guys. When you have that system of capitalism, you're transitioning from slavery to capitalism. You need a seed group of people to fuel it. You don't have people who know their worth. You don't have prideful people to fuel it and optimize it. You need a group of highly brainwashed people.
Because the distance that you can be from your slaves is going to be dictated by how many chains and shackles you have. Folks, I'm not making an intellectual, psychological, academic argument. This is a mathematical discussion. For example, if you all have dogs, most of you, well, those of you who have dogs, those of you who have pets, the majority of you don't put your pets on a leash. Why not? Simple reason. It's very inefficient. You try to train your pets so that they don't need to be on a leash. Otherwise, you're going to have to, in order to keep them under control, you have to hold a physical leash, Well, yes, it limits how far they can go, but it also limits how far you can go. So instead of you being able to divert your energies and attention into another direction, you instead have to concentrate on this leash, on this shackle. People, this is not an academic exercise. This isn't gaslighting. I'm not saying this because, well, it sounds cute and Jason's trying to rewrite slavery to make it sound like, see, they had to take them off. No, I'm saying that this is the way it's always done. Whether you're talking about ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, Russia, Nazi Germany. Come on, folks. You go and take a look at that. Shackles are very rarely visible. Shackles are expensive, they're heavy, you have to keep renewing them if they break, but most of all, they limit mobility. You want to get these slaves to work with a minimal amount of oversight so that they're over there making you passive income so you can concentrate your focus and your energies in other directions. That is optimizing it.
So that's a very good point, and you definitely see that today as well as in the past. When one group who's fighting to get out of that servant class position, once they fight and make it out, then interference, usually in the form of violence and government restrictions, tears everything down and try to put them back into that class right there. They want to rule with a iron fist and through fear to put you back into that psychologically inept position right there. So that was a good point. They want you in that position because you're the worker, you're the servant, not shackled, but you're providing, well, you're doing your own mental shackling yourself, but you're providing these people with comfort so they can focus on other things, and you're just like the AA batteries as powering that machine that allowed those people to get passive income and stay in that position that they're in.
So now you have to call in the psychologists. You have to call in the psychologists and the mental people, and now you're going to have academia get involved, and now your centers of academic study. Now you're going to start coming into things like psychology and the psyche and the examination of man, and how do you get people to think these things and behave a certain way. You're going to put a lot of money into that because you need to figure out, by the way, how do I control them without these shackles? This is limiting my mobility. How do I get them to accept their servitude without incident? And that's when you start having your brain trusts go to work. That's when they start talking and they say, okay, we're going to sit down. Let's go ahead and examine this here. How do you make that happen? And don't you know, one of the major hallmarks of European society has been psychology. Where do you think they honed it? Where do you think they started looking into that? They started first examining that with, by the way, how do you keep these slaves from rising up against you? We have to take the shackles off, otherwise we have not optimized the workforce. But once you take the shackles off, of course, your first concern is what's to prevent them from busting me upside the head.
All right, so he's making some very good points, very powerful points, real points. Don't let anybody tell you that social engineering is not a real thing. I mean, universities, colleges, they study these. You have think tanks that study on how to, manipulate the psyche of people. Big money has been spent advertising. I mean, you can convince people, it's a chewing gum commercials. You can convince somebody, hey man, you'll get this girl if you buy our gum in mint or spearmint. They'll be all over you. So I mean, hey, so if you can do that for some simple stuff, when you trying to maintain your subjugation over people that you conquered, I mean, hey, you can distract them so many ways. You can have them fighting against one another. You can have them thinking that, hey, you're the savior, you're all loving, all kind, all good. I mean, and another point, the psychological tactics and attacks, they come in a variety of ways, man. They come through the educational fields, the entertainment industry, even the medical field, government. It's so many intricate, sophisticated ways that these psychological attacks can reach you. So let's go on to the next point.
For those of you who've seen my documentary film Race War, none less than Richard Spencer sat there and told you why they sit here and write their books and say, why, you know, when you examine the slave plantations of America, the slave owners were not all these brutal barbarians. Really? Why, no. As a matter of fact, the relationship they had with their slaves was not really master-slave. I mean, the relationship they had with their slaves was really paternal. So in other words, you're saying that the slaves saw the plantation owner as Big Daddy? Why, yes. So you see, this is why you today should not be angry about it, because your great-great-great-great-grandparents, well, he was really just like white Big Daddy, and you all need to be cool with that. But folks, brothers and sisters, that's not actually too far off the mark of their intent. None other than Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, a true psychologist, taught us this. Remember that she said the goal of white supremacy is to infantilize you. Every interaction they have with us, they attempt to frame it and engineer it as parent-child. The men are referred to as boys, no matter how old you are. The females are the girls and gals, no matter how old they are. The males, the people are expected to behave like eternal adolescents, no matter how old you are.
That's something that we really have to watch out for. You see this big time in entertainment, movies, TV shows, especially music. True, the music is terrible. I mean, throw somebody out there, young, whoever, Lil, whatever, you know, and then he act like a fool. And I was thinking foolishly, you know, these people are tools of the medium to psychologically mess you up. So let's go ahead and move forward with the next point.
When you talk to them, when it comes to running the society, they keep telling you that all the things that actually run the society, the monetary system, fractional reserve banking, economic strategy, derivatives, politics, economic policy, social policy, they keep telling you and me, oh, this would be too complicated for you. You need to let us run this. This would just be too hard for you. You just let us run this. Yeah, the Federal Reserve System and investment bank, this would just be too complicated for you. We'll take care of the really big stuff. You take care of entertaining our guests. And that is the way that it is for you today, right now, to this day.
So you guys hear that? Very important stuff. All the components of having a thriving civilization, the political part, the educational part, the military parts, the commerce, having strong enterprise. Now, the aim of this channel is to show melanated Negro civilizations that are thriving all over the world. The Americas, Europe, Asia, India, Australia, South America, Africa especially, so on and so forth. Of course, I'm speaking from a historical standpoint so that we can see the template, learn from it, tweak things, modify it so that it can work in our present day and continue to, make adjustments for the next generations. It is, after all, a cultural competition, so it's going to be a tug of war, so to speak. So that's why this channel is important, and this is my most important video presentation to date. I say that because you're seeing the motivations behind the formation of this channel, the historical component of everything. There's a reason for it. It's not just in 1950 something so and so happened and that's it. No, you draw from history, you learn from history. There's a template that history uncovers, a template that exposes the methods that leads to these solutions. That's the goal, not just baseless history, just to hear myself talk and hear other people give an opinion. No, it's to learn from. All right, so let's move on to the next point.
They tell you, we'll take care of the big stuff. And a lot of folks think, woo, that show is good. Let him take care of all that old big fancy stuff there and fighting with the IRS and fighting with all them numbers and things like that right there. Now, I don't want to get involved with all that there. Let me go ahead and take care of this part down here. It's just simple and easy, and just that quickly, you've fallen into the trap. Just that quickly, you fell for the bait and you've fallen into the trap, because you see those upper levels, that's where the power is. That is where control over all of you is. That's where it is.
So I definitely agree, no surprise. One thing I want to say is that it's no secret that the society that we live in the United States and the broader Western society around the world, they don't want to show melanated men and women in high positions accomplishing whatever task with cleverness, positions of authority, positions of power, positions of influence, positions of prestige. There's always that slave narrative that has its presence felt. It can either be on a small scale, medium scale, even outright large scale. That's definitely a topic that we have to address, we have to attack, and we have to be not an equal force, because you get nothing done if it's equal. You have to be a greater force, and this platform is definitely going to go above and beyond in trying to overcome this stuff and reinstall our history back into the consciousness of people. You know, I don't care if people don't like it. I don't care if it makes people uncomfortable. We're going to show these people in positions of power, authority, prestige, influence. It won't just be about the civilization, but individuals. Let's go to the next point being made.
And everything they do is intended to intimidate you from aspiring or even investigating what they're doing up there. And yet what they're doing up there controls every facet of your life. Once again, 720 degrees of the analysis you'll receive absolutely nowhere else. Once again, your life is being controlled without shackles. They are able to physically control you without shackles. They are able to physically control your behavior, physically confine you, no shackle, no chain, no handcuff, no overseer in sight, and yet you are completely under control. Physically under control. What do you know? All this time later, there you are. Right back there again. When you've been telling yourself here that you're convinced, don't worry, they'll take care of the big stuff here, and I'll be all right here. And next thing you know, you're controlled. And did you even realize it? Of course not. As a matter of fact, you think it was your idea. Why? You think that not struggling for something else was actually what you really wanted, not something you were maneuvered into or engineered into. Well, it was something you chose. And isn't that what they're going to tell you? Why didn't you choose this? When in reality, that's a lie. In reality, that's a lie, because how can I choose something when I've been given a menu of options that I didn't create? Which is the legacy of Malcolm X. The reason why we have a legacy of resistance is because these people try to tell us that we chose where we are today, and that is a lie. They handed you a menu, and they told you you can choose anything that's on this menu that we gave you, but you can't choose anything that's not on it.
Again, history is the most rewarding field of study because the template, the methods, the mentalities, and then the solution, that's everything that you'll find.
So they give you a menu of hamburgers. Well, here's hamburgers and fries. You're like, well, I want some seafood. Yeah, you can't choose that. How about some Italian? Can't choose that either. Chinese? Nope. Mexican? Nope. You can have all the burgers you want. You can have any type of burger you want. You can choose whatever's on this menu, but you can't choose anything that's not on it. So once again, they try to convince you that whatever's on the menu, that's the only thing that exists. And if you do figure out that there's more that exists that's on the menu, they tell you can't have that one. And that's when the conversation turns hostile. Now that is where all of us are today. I assume most of you listening to me today, that's where you are. You are here today listening to this broadcast because you said, yeah, I want to choose the items on the menu myself. I don't want you bringing me another menu and telling me this is what I'm going to eat. I want to start writing in some things on this menu. Well, we're a hamburger restaurant. Well, you better call your supplier and tell him to get some calamari.
Again, he's dropping gems. These analogies are very much so on point. So listen to what he said. When you start speaking up for yourself on behalf of yourself and your people, then there's pushback. But then when you are firm with it and stern with what you demand, then it turns hostile. And you know what? Before I even elaborate further, let's go ahead and go into his next point. He's continuing this topic right here.
Because from here on in, I'm choosing what's on my menu. You will no longer dictate to me what it is I get to have. I'll choose it just like you choose it because I just couldn't help but notice you're handing me a menu for this hamburger shack and then you're leaving out of here and going to the French restaurant down the street. Oh, you own that one too. Oh, that's the one you eat at. I couldn't help but notice hamburgers aren't even on the menu at that place you at. Where you eat at, you all don't eat hamburgers down there. Y'all do something different. You brought the hamburger menu to me. But I couldn't help but notice you're not eating off that menu. Now, why did you have to go and do that? Why did you have to go and open that can of worms? Why couldn't you just eat the menu that we gave you? That we gave your grandfathers and your grandmothers and your great-grandfathers and your great-grandmothers. Why couldn't you just do that? Because, yeah, that wanting something not on the menu thing, well, the problem with that is, you see, the only way you can get that one is if you take it off of my plate.
So did you guys hear that? Okay, now let's make this a full circle moment. At the start of this presentation here, you know, he was talking about a world war, and the issue was that, okay, your history is being replaced, co-opted, whitewashed. Your accomplishments, your geography replaced, co-opted, whitewashed. And then really just to bring it back to this point from the last clip, the people, they're like, okay, so why did you have to go and do that? Okay, now let's take it back to the first clip. So if you are convinced of what you've already done, you'd feel that you have a birthright to have and protect. You will protect what's yours. You will protect what's owed to you. You will protect what you are entitled to because you know your connections. You know where your people stem from inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. You know that you're an original person. So when they're talking about, okay, why did you go and have to do that? You'll tell them why, instead of being programmed to believe that you are irrelevant. When you believe that you're irrelevant and come from irrelevancy, you really don't have that fight in you. to the fullest extent, to the maximum extent that you should have. You're not operating properly. So with that said, let's go to the next point.
Well, didn't you steal it off of ours to begin with? Well, it seems that we've reached an impasse, haven't we? That's when things get ugly. That's when they start gunning your profits down. That's when they start murdering people in their beds. Peace to Fred Hampton. That's when folks start disappearing. That's when people start getting redlined. That's when freeways start getting put through. That's when you have a prison industrial complex and mass incarceration across the board. That's when that gets kicked off. That's when the bombs start dropping and the buildings start exploding and the neighborhood goes up in flames. That's when that starts to happen. When you have black folk talking about owning something, holding something, when you start talking about power, wealth, and influence, that's when folks start dying. That's when the bullets start flying. That's when folks start getting moved out as a group. That's when that starts occurring. That's when you start seeing the white supremacists taken to the streets and marching. Right when we start saying those things. It was Malcolm who was steadfast and was the most prominent voice at a critical juncture that kept repeating endlessly that was exactly what it had to be. And let us be very, very clear about this. Malcolm said it multiple times and it's still true today. His aim was not that we just be a bunch of black folks out there and say revolution and we gonna take a block. The man's message was founded and based upon economics, that we must control the economies of our communities from the very beginning. It was the teaching that was given to him by Elijah Muhammad that had been passed down before Elijah Muhammad. We all understood that, or at least most of us should have, that they hate us because we're black, okay, but they're able to victimize us because we're poor. Control of our economy, that's the name of the game. You are not a viable people if you do not control the resources and the means of production. If other people control your resources and your means of production, you can be a servant. You can never be a master. You can never control yourself.
All very valid points. So the definition of impasse, and I'm reading it from Google, is a situation in which no progress can be made or no advancement is possible. So it's a dead end, deadlock, stalemate, stand still. So these points are very relevant because all the things that went about in the past, that's what we see. We see the ramifications of it in our present day, the end results, but it can be changed. Let me say on this platform here, I'm definitely going to speak on the history that occurred right after slavery all the way to our day. The reason that we're in this situation that we're in today. A lot of government sponsored, interference took place. There was a lot of terrorist organizations that preyed upon people. It was just a lot, man. When you look at the educational world from back in the day, you had a lot of racist anthropologists, archaeologists, other fields. They were just on that garbage, just to put it lightly. That's where they start minimizing the people. And then when they start doing that, then they're like, okay, we're going to push them down the totem pole and have them be the servant class. And I'm going to go over Red Summer 1919. I'm definitely going to cover Tulsa, what happened in Tulsa. And what else? There's so many other massacres that happened around the U.S. in certain times. So that's what this platform is about, and that's why you have to delve into history. You have to see what led up to present day occurrences. Now, the reason I call this channel Tactical Intellectual and have the slogan Historical, Intellectual, and Tactical is because you have to be aware of all the tactics that was done to us in the past, and then the tactics that are still being done to us the maintenance of subjugation. When you subjugate a people, you have to maintain it over the span of countless generations until the class of people under subjugation gets tired and become that force, not the equal force, but the greater force than the people that's over you. Now, the broadcast by Jason Black that I am using in this presentation, the link to that video broadcast will be in the description. And to close out this video presentation here, we're going to replay that Malcolm X quote in regards to history.
Of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward all research. And when you see that you got problems, all you have to do is examine the historic method used all over the world by others who had problems similar to yours. And once you see how they got theirs straight, then you know how you can get yours straight. Please.